King, here I come. Hello, sports fans, sports collectors, and all hobbyists. Welcome to the Car King Sports and Variety Show. I am your host, the Catman, Brian Cataquet, a.k.a. the Car King. We are live on ABC's KMET 1490 AM.com, your number one spot right here for news and talk on the West Coast. I thank everyone for tuning in this morning. On the telephone line, I welcome to the program a pitcher who played for the 1953 Chicago American Giants of the Negro Leagues. I welcome in Dennis Biddle. Dennis, great to have you. Honor.
Yes, an honor to be here.
Oh, my pleasure to have an historic baseball athlete on the program, Dennis.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's begin. Very early years, 6 years old. I believe that's where your love for the game began, right?
Yes, I was quite young. I'm from a little town in Arkansas, Magnolia, Arkansas. It's a population 9,999. The day I was born, I made it 10,000. But that's the name of the Magnolia, Arkansas. I went to a all-black school, and everything we had, books, everything came from the white school. So that's why I grew up there. I grew up in.
Now, Dennis, so first I'm reading about your career. Now, you were good at football before baseball, right?
Oh, see, in the South, baseball was not a major sport. Mm-hmm. Yeah, football and basketball were. This was back in the early 50s. And I excelled in football and basketball. I graduated from high school. I had a scholarship offer to play football at Grambling College. Eddie Robertson recruited me for football. And I also had a basketball scholarship at Arkansas A&M, which is now the University of Arkansas. But I wanted to play baseball, and Jackie had opened the door in 1947, and I felt I had a chance. So I excelled in baseball, and I went to the state tournament. I pitched in the state tournament. This was something it called the Farmers Association tournament, and I pitched a no-hitter. And I didn't know I was being scouted. The white scouts, Major League was not scouting the black schools and stuff for talent. But it was a guy there from the Chicago American Giants. He scouted me and asked me if I would like to play in the Negro League. And at that time, I knew nothing about the Negro League. I accepted the fact that I said, yes, I would love to, but I didn't know it was going to be 1,000 miles away in Chicago. But I had to go all the way to Chicago to try out for the team, and I made the team, and I played 2 years there in the Negro Baseball League.
In the Negro. So you played for the Chicago American Giants in '53. If I'm not mistaken, that was the last year of the Chicago American Giants, right?
No. The last year was '56.
It was '56.
I don't know. You have to really understand what was happening back then. Once Jackie opened the door, all media focus turned to watch us now play in the major leagues. The Negro League did not get the notoriety they was getting before then. A lot of great ball players played and died and never had the opportunity to play in the major league. A lot of them did because of that. Once the black players start going to the major league, then everybody, including the fans too, turned now to watch us play in the major leagues. If you can remember back then, there was a lot of players from the Negro League went to the major league and the minor leagues. This is what happened right after Jackie. And but the Negro League continued on, and this is what's missing. A part of our history that's missing. The Negro League continued on to 1963. very little was written down about the Negro League. Therefore, there's a lot of misconception, including the historians and the writers about the league. Everybody watching us now play in the major league. A lot of people do not know that from 1949, after 1949, the major league scouts were not scouting black schools, black talent. The Negro League teams turned into that a training ground for the major leagues. That was Branch Rickey's long-range goal, and a lot of people, if they read his book, he'll tell you his long-range goal was eventually was going to be the Negro League was going to be a minor league system for the major league. This was his long-range goal, but it never materialized. But that's what it really was. But the Negro League team for three or 4 years were doing it on their own. They were these older guys that were too old to go in. When Jackie opened the door, they went out and scouted young talent and trained them for the major league, signed them to loan binding contract. So if the major league were interested, they had to purchase that contract, and they would get enough money to pay those older players to keep the league going. This is what really happened. This is what historians and writers miss. They don't know. Only the player that was there can confer this. And I just want to, in my book, I talk about this, Brian. I talk about how.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you. You have a book out. Go ahead, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, my book was put out because a lot of misconception was coming out about the living player. In 1995, all the living players of the Negro League, over 300 players, was invited to Kansas City to the 75th anniversary of the Negro Baseball League. I'm running a little ahead, but this is all in my book. But they had a meeting because there was a misconception. There were a few older guys there that played up to 1949, but most of the guys there played after 1949. And they were there, and they had no representation. Everybody was talking about the guys that played in the major leagues up to then, and not about the guys that was still living that played, And I, along with Mr. Sherwood Broad, I'm talking fast. This is all in the book. We started we organized a living player, and that's where all the misconceptions started right there with the missing player. Because how you know he played? Nothing was written down, so we had to come on. Buck O'Neill ran the meeting. The meeting was if you played one day on a Negro League team, you were considered a Negro League baseball player. And what happened is that a lot of the players had no representation that they played, so you had to have played against somebody that did play. And that's how we set our bylaws up in the foundation. Foundation is called yesterday's Negro League Baseball Players Foundation. Even a lot of the historians discredited us because of this. They could only put down things that were written down. How you gonna write something? How you gonna record something that's not written down?
Of course. Of course.
That's the big problem, and I'm fighting that right this day. And Brian, my book details the start of it. My second book is coming out first of the year. It's going to detail the whole thing. Thank God for players still living. Thank God for the players. It's over 40 players still living that played in the Negro League, all in the 80s and 90s.
Well, Dennis, since we're on the topic of your book, so everyone listening, where can they purchase this book?
This book can be purchased at Amazon. You could go, if you want an autographed copy, you can contact yesterday's Negro League Baseball Players Foundation, and you can get a autographed copy from me. So,
all right.
Amazon got the book. Okay, what do you want me to?
I'm sorry. You said you have a second book coming out. Do we know when that's due? Is that going to be due in the summer of 2025?
Yes, it's going to be due with them, and that's going to detail. It's going to wrap it up. It's really going to wrap it up, Brian. There's a lot, Brian. I could tell you things that these old men, and thank God I had the opportunity to play with and against some of the greatest ball players that ever played the game. Guys that they never wrote about, guys Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson got their name from. They were just as good as they were, but got no representation. And this is where I came in to get them some.
I was going to say, Dennis, we got to remind everyone that your notoriety to fame came when you beat Lefty McInnes. Now, for those listening, Lefty McInnes was the pitcher who beat the man, Satchel Paige, right? And you were the man who beat Lefty McInnes.
That's right. And I got the nickname of the man who beat the man who beat the man. Yes, I did.
Wow. So now Lefty McInnes played for the Philadelphia Stars. And again, he
played with a lot of teams. But if you look at the records of some of those older players, they played on several teams. Because the contracts were not binding then. They were only binding after Jackie Robinson opened the door, and the Negro League team start training young players for the Major League. This is what's missing. Hank Aaron, Ernie Banks, Willie May, these guys came from the Negro League team. They weren't scouted by the Major League scouts. They were scouted only when they got to the Negro League. They were scouted by the Major League scouts. But the Major League could not get them until they purchased their contract. And historians and writers don't even know nothing about this. They didn't write about it, but this is what was happening. My contract that's in my book is a binding contract. They couldn't even talk to me. They had to talk to them. And if they were interested in me, if a Major League team was, they had to purchase that contract. And then you was like a free agent only until you made that team. But this is. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, Dennis. So after Jackie, he broke the barrier. Now, then Larry Doby comes in. Now, were you familiar? Now, were you familiar with Larry Doby? Like, were you close with? Did you ever speak with him during your playing days?
I talked to Larry just about every other day. When we organized the living players, he was very concerned about that. And before he died, and Larry, he caught hell too, but he never talked about it much. He only wanted those guys that he played with and against to get some kind of recognition for their contribution to the game of baseball. And that's what I've done for the last 30 years, Brian. 30 years I've been doing this.
Wow. What about Cool Papa Bell? He also played for the American Giants, right? Chicago American Giants.
Yeah. He was a coach. He didn't play well. Playing coach, you can say that. He was one of those players that was training us. His job was to train the players how to run the bases. And right there at Old Comiskey Park in Chicago, I remember him training us how to run the bases. And he was 55 years old then. But he was a great friend of mine. He passed a lot of the history that I just said today came from Cool Papa Bell. We couldn't call him Cool Papa. We had to say Mr. Bell. The older guy would call him Cool Papa. I'm Mr. Bell or you, boy. That was it.
How about Josh Gibson?
I never met Josh. Josh died before Jackie even came into the league.
Here's another immortal.
Right. But and I think of that, Brian, and I was there. When I think of the league itself, all those older guys, dead and gone, their name will never be known. Josh just hit home runs off of everybody. There was a lot of pitchers struck out Josh like they owned him. Sasha Page didn't strike out everybody in the Negro League. There was a lot of guys hit home runs off him like they owned it, but never got no kind of recognition. And this is what I want my young people to know when they read about all those great players that's now going into the Major League record books and things. That's great, but there's a lot of players that should be there that'll never be there, and that hurts me. It really does. And I know I was only there for a couple of years, but that's my heart. My heart is to make sure. That's why I wrote the book. The first book got documents and things in there to prove what I'm saying to you, and the second book going to be the words coming from those men who passed on.
We're talking with Dennis Biddle, who pitched in the 1953 season for the Negro Leagues. And Dennis, reading a little bit about your career, you also invented a pitch that the major leagues called them. They call it the sinker, but you had a pitch that was called a drop ball, right?
That's what we called it, a drop. That was my bread and butter pitch. If I got 2 strikes on a player, he's going to get 3 of them in a row. Because 90% of them were balls. If you look now in the major league, when they throw the sinker, and that's what it really was, the sinker, but we call it a drop. Those guys swings the ball and it's on the ground. It's a Fuller pitch, more or less. And I was very successful with that through my high school playing and the Negro League, when I played in the Negro League. Yeah.
Amazing. So your debut, how was your reaction when you first made your debut? Do you remember it well? Were you nervous? Were you proud? Like your family proud?
Yes. I was. My first game was pitched in Memphis, Tennessee, 1953, against the
Red Sox, right? Memphis Red Sox?
Yeah, Memphis Red Sox at Martin Stadium. And I was a little bit nervous, but the day before then, we played in Nashville. And they played in Nashville. I didn't play. I was pitching my first game in Memphis. But I was a little bit, I had never experienced the things I was experiencing at a ball game. These people at the game were calling us all kind of names. They could hear the word, derogatory words up and down, from the fans and stuff. It kind of bothered me. I'll never forget Double Duty Radcliffe, who was the coach. He caught me in my collar and he said, "Look, boy, if you let that negativism affect your play out on that field, you ain't gonna never make it." I'll never forget that. And he was right. You say you got to learn to look at it and not even hear it. And I had to do that. That was the most difficult thing in the Negro League that I had to do.
Man. And your catcher at that time, I believe, was Ted Double Duty Radcliffe, right?
He was a playing coach, yes. He was a playing coach.
Unbelievable. And these names, I collect the baseball cards of these players, and I can't believe, you were on the field with these legendary names.
Yes, sir. I was right there. Sitting. James Bell, Mr. Bell didn't smoke and he didn't drink. We get to places like Memphis and Chicago where you couldn't go after the game, the guy would go to the bars. I couldn't go to the bar. I'm 17 years old. I couldn't get in there. And James Bell, he didn't drink or smoke. He sat back at the hotel and he would talk to me. He would tell me things that happened way before I was born in the Negro Baseball League. And these are the things I write about in my second book. Mr. Bell, he was like a genius of baseball history. And a lot of the players write about books and things about their accomplishment. But Mr. Bell told me about the history, things that happened that was never recorded, never written down, never talked about, a part of the history. And that's what I live with every day.
And Dennis, tell me if I'm correct on this. Now, when you guys traveled, you played against the white teams, right? Right.
Most of the team, we did most of bomb stoning. that was how we can make enough money to go to the next town. The booking agent made the money because if he heard Chicago American Giants were playing the Memphis Red Sox, and he knew the route, he would set up 2 or 3 games in between there for us to play to get money to keep going the next one. That's how we got most of the money, bumps on it. And we played a lot of white teams. A lot of white teams. We played 40% of the game. There were some black players on the white team, some of them. And if one of our players got hurt or couldn't play anymore, they were trying to recruit that player to play with us. But a lot of them couldn't travel, and some of them did. So a lot of the Negro League ball players were recruited that way by playing against some Negro League teams, and the player get hurt. They'll recruit him.
Wow. Now, have you ever had a conversation with Jackie Robinson?
Yes. I met Jackie in 1955 in Chicago. I was a free agent with the Cubs, going to be a free agent with the Cubs. But Ernie Banks was a good friend of Sherwood Brewer later on, and he was the one who recruited, really. They gave it to Buck O'Neill, but Sherwood Brewer was the one that really recruited him. But Ernie invited me and Gene Baker to a luncheon they was having. Gene Baker, it was supposed to be 5 of us there. Gene Baker, Ernie Banks, me, Jackie, and Doug Newcomb didn't show up. Roy Campanella came. And I'm sitting at the table looking at this man with white hair, and I heard about him and the things that done, and I was curious. They were talking about things they did and done. So I was sitting there when I'm going to get a chance to talk, and I asked Mr. Robinson, I said, did you ever think about quitting? He said, every day. He said, but I had made a promise that I would open the door so other players will be able to play in the major leagues. He told me that that's something that'll always be with me, and every time I speak somewhere, I talk about it because that's something that'll always be with me, meeting Jackie Robinson.
Unbelievable.
Yes, sir.
Now, 1954, your contract was bought by the Cubs, right?
I was told that the Chicago Cubs were going to purchase my contract. See, I reported to spring training. I was supposed to support spring training in Mesa, Arizona in 1955. And the first day, I broke my ankle sliding into third base. And what happened is that it never healed. That was really the end of my career because I felt I could run as fast as I ever did, but it never healed. It bothers me to this day. But that's something in the past, and I don't like to drill on it much because it breaks my heart to think about what would have happened, what could have happened.
Wow. And just I have a couple of minutes left. What about guys like Willie Mays, Hank Aaron? Ever had conversations with them, deep conversations?
I never talked to Willie. Hank Aaron and I were good friends. Henry know what I went through because he went through it too. But Henry played with Milwaukee. I live in Milwaukee, and when he came here, whenever when he wasn't playing, we talked. And talk about the Negro Leagues because he didn't stay that long, as long as I did. Henry was on there half a year or less, but I knew he was on his way. By the way, he was hitting the ball and nobody could stop him. But we had a lot of conversations. Even after he retired, we had conversations whenever he would come to Milwaukee. We would talk and go to the Brewers together. We would be at the Brewers a lot. and he was one of the guys that appreciated where he came from. And whenever we would go somewhere and he was around, he would come and be with us. Mays was different, but Willie would. Hank would.
Well, now you're one of the players that's always been fighting for the legacy and benefits for the Negro League players. Now, 95, Dennis. I have 1 minute left. In 1995, you were invited to the 75th anniversary, right, in Kansas City, Missouri, of the Negro Leagues baseball. How was that?
Yeah, that was 1995. I was invited to the 75th anniversary of the Negro Baseball League. And there we had no representation. They were making money, measly money off the name and likeness of the Negro League, and we wasn't getting anything. And I felt, since we didn't have no kind of, that we would set up an organization to represent those living players, not the players that were dead and gone. That record pretty well was kept. But after 1949, very few records were kept about the Negro. And I'm talking about players that played 70 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And,
so I have about 30 seconds left, Dennis. Any final words you want to say? You mentioned your book again. Any final words you want to say?
Yes. You can get the book from Amazon. You could get it from the foundation. Just go to yesterday's Negro League. .com, and you can order it and get an autographed copy from me by making a donation to our foundation.
Wow, this was great. Maybe we could do it again, Dennis. I appreciate your time.
Okay, and don't forget, Brian. I need some information afterward.
You got it. You got it, buddy.
Okay, all right.
Take care of yourself.
I want to thank you, and may God bless everyone.
Thank you, Dennis. Dennis Biddle of the 1953 Chicago American Giants of the Negro Leagues. Until next week, happy collecting to all.